Art One-on-One with Mr. Burgher.
Welcome to Art One-on-One. I am your pod boss, Nicole Jordan, alongside your professional artist and master educator, Mr. Burgher.
Yes. Some say I'm America's favorite art teacher. Some don't. I don't know. It just depends on the day.
We will see. It's yet to be determined. I guess you'll have to prove it.
Yeah. I prove it. Week after week, episode after episode.
You are my favorite Art 101. Like I was telling you, I was doing my research yesterday and going into the archives and then researching some of the artists that we're talking about, and I was watching other people's videos, and as I'm doing it, I'm like, I didn't want to tell you this so it wouldn't go to your head, but your videos are better by far than anything I watched on yesterday. Anyway.
I wouldn't say that I am the greatest skilled person at putting together the videos, and really I haven't been doing a ton of stuff, but I have increased and I have learned from my mistakes, and slowly and steadily I am catching up with the other art people that are out there. And I appreciate the viewers. I appreciate the input. Sometimes it's a little bit it's a little bit wearing, to be honest with you.
What's wearing?
Like, for example, I put out a video that I had made back in December, and it had gone out on TikTok, and it had done pretty well. So I put it out on my YouTube as a short, and it was like, oh, you said pronunciate. If I'm going to give you information, I'm going to give you literal information. But if I'm if I'm saying something like, all right, everybody, some people give me a hard time for my pronunciations of things. Well,
that's not the focus of your podcast.
Right.
Thing.
Right.
Look at the content.
The linguistics of the conversation is not whether or not I'm using it actual dictionary to put together the entire vocabulary of my essence.
This is a term for you lately. Dramatic.
You
are being dramatic.
I take it with a grain of salt, because everybody wants to have some wise ass thing to say about the guy that's making the video, instead of going out. Oh,
that's what you're gonna. I mean, if you're gonna make videos, you're gonna
have
be
it.
exposed.
It goes with the territory. It goes with the territory.
Get over it.
I deal with it. My boy Kevin Nash deals with it.
Well, and here's
you get no matter what you do. If you're putting yourself out there, you're gonna get criticized for it.
Okay.
So you just deal with it and just
move on.
Piss on them, move on.
Well, interestingly enough, today's episode, hopefully they will lay off of you, because it is our Father's Day episode.
And this is my Father's Day shirt.
That's a Father's Day shirt.
Yeah, this is my Father's Day shirt. This is probably going back close to pushing 20 years. This is a 20-year-old vintage shirt.
I like that shirt.
Brooklyn and Brody, my oldest children, were at a little strip mall, and they saw this shirt and bought me this. Knew it was for you. They knew it was for me.
That is a perfect.
And so they said that this shirt is our dad. So
spot on.
So that is why
you're a bad boy.
That is why I'm wearing. Well, clearly, when it comes to my vocabulary skills,
would you get over it? Seriously,
I am very bad.
Well, today everybody
you're using a very immature type word like bad. You should use something like.
Anyway, let's move on.
That's what I would comment on. I can't stand when you talk like that. Anyway, so we are going to jump around a bit today. We are not going to start with Journey into the Archives. We are actually, yeah, I am the pod boss, Okay. We're actually going to move into Journey into the Archives, because we're talking about Father's Day, because we're on that topic,
All right.
I decided to go into a video called The Three Wyeth Generations.
The
You remember
three,
doing that?
I do recall that. That's I don't know how many years ago was that? 2
I
or
knew
3?
you were going to ask me that, and I forget to look
Uh,
nowadays.
it it's going back a ways. So what was
It was one of the older
actually
ones.
it's got to be older than 2 years because
I was going to say 3 or 4.
yeah,
Where it was at in the videos, I think it's probably
because I know it was at a time when I was living in North Carolina. Because I distinctly recall the video. Uh, Sometimes like its location. Like I'll remember a video by the location. So for example, I remember the Henry Russo video because that was when I took Hank to the North Carolina Zoo and we did it at the zoo. I remember the one and right as I was doing that around the same time frame that I made the Henry Russo one, I also made one on Augusta Savage, who was a Harlem Renaissance artist and educator, and I made that one at Dollywood with Etta.
Okay.
And so I sometimes remember the video based upon like the location or the whatever, if it was something special. Sometimes it's just like in a studio or in a space.
Right.
So I kind of remember what it was by that space. But at any rate, this particular one was shot in a washing machine,
Yeah, I don't know
a
what
car
you're
wash,
thinking.
a car
It's hard to
wash.
hear. I mean, that from that perspective is a little
But
hard to
it
hear
but it
your
was
intro, and
but
I
it
knew
was
you were trying to be different, but
I was trying to be different, and I liked the colors, and I'd gone to the car wash, and I like all the colors in the car wash. I'm like, God, this would be a cool place to do a podcast or whatnot.
other than it's hard to hear.
Other than it's hard to.
Lighting's beautiful, but you can't hear shit.
Well,
So
it's not that it's really beautiful. It's just like all the colors and the cool stuff, and I was mesmerized by that. And I just so happen to I do have an extensive collection of National Geographics. National Geographic, if you would like to be a part of this show, let me know. I'll tag you. At any rate, we're always looking for good corporate sponsorship. I'm a huge. I've got
oh
nearly
my
every
goodness.
National Geographic from the 1950s to the 20.
Hoarder. Can you say hoarder?
Well, when it comes to National Geographics, that is true. They just don't get old. The photography is phenomenal. The stories, I mean, it very much tells the story of the times.
Tell me why you're bringing up National Geographic.
Because when I was going through the car wash, I happened to have a couple of National Geographics because what do you have to do except sit in there and read? I was reading an article on
The Wyeth Wyeth family?
on the Wyeth. I think it was NC Wyeth was actually the article, but
They're very interesting. So there's NC, there's Andrew, and there's Jamie, correct?
there's more than that.
But those are the
But
three
those
you
are the
focused
ones
on in the
that
video.
the particular video was 3 successive generations. Now there are aunts and uncles and cousins and people that have been married into the family. So there are a lot more than just those 3. But this particular video just focused on the grandfather, father, son, 3 generations.
One of the things I found really interesting on this video is like how different they were as artists. Like, I think it's Andrew or Andy that talks about how his father was such like a robust painter,
Right.
and then he was more like simple and less detailed, less in the
Right.
painting means more to him. And like his father at first was like, no, you need to put more. Like, there's not enough in here. You need to add this. And
Right.
And
I think
it's so
NC Wyeth.
interesting.
I think NC Wyeth very much wanted to tell a story, and he wanted to show the action. He wanted to show the adventure of what's going on, the big dynamic point of the. He did a lot of book illustrations,
Mhm.
so he's trying to show that particular thing of what's going down. But Andy Wyeth, he was. I'll call him Andrew. I don't feel comfortable calling him Andy.
Nickname basis.
I just made me
Andy?
uncomfortable. Anyway, I think that he was more of a
less is more.
Right. He was just trying to tell his story his way, which wasn't his father's way. And sometimes when you don't do things that your dad wants you to do, sometimes it can create uh, a,
Like
a
animosity?
a little bit,
It
or
didn't seem like they were tense about it. It just seemed like, I mean, but I guess I don't know. I didn't do the research, so that
well,
that is true. Like it
I
created
think
some
his
animosity.
NC Wyeth was kind of a control freak. Like he wanted to
Oh, yeah,
be
that's
in
right.
charge.
That's right.
He wanted to be the you listen to me, and everybody in the family needed to revolve around him and orbit him and his beliefs and step in line, where I think young young Andy probably did that, but mature Andrew did not.
Which that's what I mean.
But that's natural. That's normal.
I mean, I don't know that I would say that's normal. I think normal to me would be like allowing that if my kid were to want to be an artist, I wouldn't try to control. I would be like, okay, let's figure out what lights you up. Let's figure out the how you want to be creative and not try to control that, because if you do try to control that, you're definitely limiting what the outcome of their
Right.
art is
But
going to be.
as a parent that is a professional artist and has kind of you would have certain opinions on how to do things best because you feel like I've gone down this road. I know what I'm doing. Just like if one of your sons wanted to pursue a career that you have previously pursued or you have special insight or knowledge about, you would probably say, "Hey, you're going about this business the wrong way. Maybe you should listen to mom because I know what I'm talking about. I've done that job before." And they're like, "Yeah, well, I'm gonna do it you know what I'm saying?"
I mean, old immature person, me, would have been like that. I would have been like, you need to do it this way. This is what I learned. It's the right way. Nowadays, I mean, I would let them find their own way. I do think that now it does make me think of the maybe the one and only time, maybe the second time that I tried to do an art project in front of you. Like we did this online art class and I let you come
We did an
along.
online
I did this, me and my a couple friends of mine were in our home doing this online art class. We each had our own paintings in there and you came along. And I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be a good idea or not, but I let you. You came. I want you to meet my friends. And you critiqued me like for quite a bit of the first part of the series, like, or the training. Do you remember that?
No.
You do too. You're like, you're holding your brush wrong. You're not stroking the paper or the canvas right. You don't remember trying to control what I did?
I do recall having a conversation with you on how to hold the brush and how to paint a straight
Yeah. And
line.
my friend Linda was like, you just need to let her paint. Like, this isn't about being a professional artist. This is just about her, like, de-stressing.
Yeah, but you I think that you could have a better experience and a better product because a lot
I
of
don't
times
disagree.
I
I could
think
definitely be better.
I think that there are people that they start doing something and because they don't see results. Number one, as I go into my numbers, number one, they get discouraged because the product doesn't turn out right and they feel like, oh, I just painted a painting like a first grader. I must not be very good. But if they had some insight as to what they could do technique wise to do things a little bit more crisp or that would make their experience better, which would make their result better, which would make them come back to doing it again and again. And you know better than anyone as a college athlete and when you were starting out in high school, if you're doing technique wrong in high school, how are they going to fix you when you get to college? They're not.
Okay, I agree with that. If the outcome or what I wanted to be the outcome was this beautiful art project, but it's not for me. It's more about the experience for me. Just like letting like listening, watching, just like putting the brush to the canvas. Like I would tell you that I like during art class, oh my gosh, growing up, I hated art. I was it was terrible. I was like, and but it's not about, and maybe that's why it's not about the outcome or like what my art looks like. It's more about I just enjoy the experience.
Right.
I really don't care what the final outcome is of my painting, where you probably do, and you're like, oh my god,
Well,
like
I
it'd be
definitely
embarrassing, but
I definitely care about the end product, because the end product for me is my to some degree livelihood.
well, for
That's part of
you,
my
but not for
job.
me.
But to go a little bit further down the line, I think that there are students, there are artists that the art is about the process. And there are some artists that, like, that's not their end goal. So when I have a student come into my classroom, I have to know a little bit of backstory. Some kids will come in and say, I want to go to college to be an artist. I will help them in a different way than I'll help the kid that's like, I'm just here to get a credit.
Yeah,
Because they all come with a different agenda.
right.
And you have to know your audience to be able to tailor the class to them, your expectations to them. And again, like you say, there are some people that are like, I could care less about the end product. I just want the experience. And so you make the best experience possible for that person. And for other people, they're like, I'm frustrated because my painting isn't good. Well, let me help you make your painting. So I apologize
Yes, thank you.
after the fact.
Well, you
If I made
go after a little bit, you like, okay, this isn't what she obviously wants, so you just kind of backed off and did your own thing, which is it just took you a minute.
I didn't do anything. As I recall, I don't recall ever making art with you in a class.
No, I'm just saying at that experience where you came to where I was watching the art class and putting it on the canvas, you did try to like adjust my whatever, and then after a while you're like, okay, this is obviously not what she wants.
And the
You backed off.
brush thing, the line thing came from previously, as I recall, as I think back in my dictionary of brain thoughts, as I recall, you had helped me do some painting of walls. And I was asking you to paint a straight line across between the ceiling and the wall.
Yes.
And you were having a difficult time loading the brush, painting
I
a
was
straight.
not having a difficult time. I just was not doing.
You were making a sloppy ass mess, and you didn't want to hear it. But I
Again,
was giving it
was
to
the
you.
wall getting painted? Was the wall
It
getting
was my project, my standard, not your painting and your standard.
okay. Well, it was the best I could do.
So I apologize.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. So of these artists,
Of which artist?
NC, Andrew, and Jamie, which we didn't really talk about Jamie, but is there one? Do you like one of them more than the others just because of their approach, or do you resonate more with NC or Andy or?
Andrew, I like them all for different there's a different. It's like, do I like Salvador Dali? Do I like Andy Warhol? Yes, but for different reasons. There are different things that I like about each one.
Let's hear it.
There are things. So when you give me a group of artists, whether they're related or not related or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you a little bit different.
Always.
Right. And
So NC.
so I like NC Wyeth for the fact that his illustrations are very detailed. He has, again, you can go back to some of those classic literary books that he had made illustrations for, and they're wonderful. The colors are bold. His the detail that's in the drawings is awesome.
Was the bucking bronco? Was that one of his most famous? I mean, I immediately when I saw that, I was like, oh, I know who this is. I know what this piece
Honestly,
is.
I'm not. That's not one of the pieces that necessarily resonates with me. That was, I believe, one of the first pieces he got paid to do.
Okay.
for the Saturday Evening Post. As I recall, again, it's been a couple years, but as I recall, that particular work was done as a cover for the Saturday Evening
Right, and
Post or
maybe
some
that's
mag. I
why
think it was Saturday
just
Evening
that
Post.
image.
But that's what resonates with me with him. Now, when I look at Andrew Wyeth, like his attention to detail is really, really sharp. He does some like Christina's World.
Yeah.
The grass that's in there, it's like, oh my God, it would take 1,000 years to paint that. And obviously he did it in less than 1,000 years. He did, just these great, like the grass that he does blows my brain away. At the same time, he does some really interesting watercolor paintings that are very simple and they're not crazy detailed, but his color palette is very similar to his father's, but also he approaches it in a different way, and I appreciate that. When it comes to Jamie Wyeth, I appreciate his like he does things that are a little bit more dreamlike, a little like his psychology, his storytelling is a little bit it's a little weird and I kind of like it. Like he did some like paintings of seagulls that are just like out of this world, like insane. He did like he had a dream of his father and
Oh,
Andy
yeah, gotcha.
Warhol and things, and I can't recall
Watching
the
from the distance, is it that one?
I don't recall the name of the painting. That could be um where he had a dream and it's very surreal. It's got like Andy Warhol because he worked for Andy
Yeah,
Warhol as an
yeah.
assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have Andy Warhol in the distance and you have his father and his grandfather and these symbols of his upbringing to some degree in there, and I appreciate his surrealistic slant in some of his works. Although they're coming from a place of realism, he puts a kind of a surrealistic twist on it, and I think I approach my work in a not exactly the same way, but in a similar sort of way at times.
Okay, you say that again. So if you were to describe your work, it's from a realistic approach, but
I
adding in a
right.
surrealist
it's
perspective.
it's my work is very pop surrealist. So there's like these pop culture themes like movies or references and angles from things that we would see in popular culture, whether that's from movies or TV or
Video games.
video games or whatever it might be. Where and then I kind of put a surrealistic sort of spin on it, like watching a movie in a dream. Um, and that would be kind of how I approach my some of my work. Not always, because
Yeah.
I mix it up quite a bit. I'm a little bit Jim Dine when it comes to my approach of making art, where I don't necessarily stick to one way of doing it all of the time, but it changes at any rate.
Well, and speaking of like changes with Andrew, NC, and Jamie, did they all go to the same like art school, like have that foundational teaching from similar
No,
places and people? No. So that makes sense
uh,
why they are so different.
other than one learned from the next. They
Right.
Jamie Wyeth and Andrew Wyeth were both homeschooled. And so you have NC Wyeth, who taught his son to paint, and his son learned to paint and be a painter and a professional artist. And he kind of went through the chain as a homeschooled uh, person. And he had that in home 24/7 training of doing it. And then when Jamie Wyeth got to school age, he did the same thing. He wanted to be a professional artist. He stayed home and he learned from his dad. And so one generation taught the next that taught the next. And um and so there is this passing
Right.
from one
This is
generation to the
definitely going
next.
to influence you when you're
Right.
watching
And
it.
so it's safe to say, like, the and I see this a little bit as an art teacher. I have students of mine, former students of mine, that have started out in my classroom, learned from me. Now they have their own art classrooms and they're teaching art. And so it's not my classroom, but they're getting a little slice of me
Right.
in that. There's a colleague of mine, Mr. Golightly,
That's who I was
who is he's a teacher at and he was a student teacher of mine. He wasn't a high school student of mine, but he was when he was in college and he was student teaching, he was in my classroom. And so he comes into my classroom and I give him some insights and a place to learn and give him, the philosophies of me to some degree.
Have you had him on your podcast? This
He-
podcast?
Yeah, he and I did the Jackson Pollock one together because he does some abstract stuff and he kind of comes from a root of abstraction that I don't necessarily hail from. So I used his experience and his knowledge of abstraction to kind of bolster that.
I would really love to keep this podcast upbeat since it's Father's Day and all, and
Oh, yeah.
but there was a lot of tragedy. Like, of the two artists and videos that I watched with the Wyeth family, I mean, quite a bit of tragedy in there with the train and the accident, and he died. He lived fairly long though, NC, correct?
No, he
No?
was like in his 60s.
Well, in that day and age was
No. He he definitely was not in good health, but he definitely died prematurely. I mean, he
Well,
was hit by a train.
I understand he died prematurely, but Yeah.
And he died with his
grandson.
grandson. And again,
And there is some interesting, there's some interesting
there's a lot of family
drama.
turmoil and drama and just some sad stuff in there, and all families have that. All families have that.
Of course, there's always going to be trauma,
Right.
but it seems like there was an
You say an exceedingly. I don't think it's exceeding.
Well, you're right. I'm
I think
thinking
every
more of-
family has their shit shows that are going on, whether it's out in public knowledge or they're under the microscope of the people knowing what they're doing in their private lives, whereas people don't necessarily know the baggage of your family or my family or whatever, because we're not under that same microscope that a prominent family like the Wyeth family is.
Well, it definitely, I think, influences them, and I don't. Some of those pieces that you talk about in there was a piece that you talked about in there, and you can post it obviously, but where like there's a depiction of like the place where the accident happened with NC, and then like a child or like an adolescent that was wearing the hat of the.
Yeah.
It definitely influenced him as an artist. Was that Jamie that did that, or was that
It was
Andrew that
Andrew
did that?
Wyeth.
Andrew. Okay. So my point is just like focusing on the tragedy part of it that really resonates or leads me into the Ask the Art Guides, which
Ask
is the next.
the Art Guides, our longest running segment, which is going to evolve here shortly. We're getting down to just, I don't know how many.
Four parts left.
How many?
4.
Oh my gosh.
I know. What are we gonna do? We gotta figure it out.
Got to
too.
figure out a deck or what.
Um,
So if you have any ideas on another art-related deck or
non-art related deck that
let
would
us
be
know. But
inspiring for our conversation.
leave it down in the comments or any comment as long as it's not about how I enunciate words.
Well, speaking of enunciate, I'm not sure I'm gonna enunciate, but Edvard Munch.
Edvard Munch.
Edvard Munch is who I pulled for today. And the topic that I would like to focus on,
The point of conversation.
yes,
Yeah.
because of where we've been talking, we can just kind of elaborate more on it, is ask anxiety to pose for you. That's what I'm going to focus on.
Ask anxiety to pose for you, which is the inspiration of Munch,
is
according to the
interesting.
card. And Munch was very much a anxious person. He had lots of quirks, to say it nicely, that were out there. And he was very anxious about death and dying. And his mother had died when he was very young. He had a sister that died at a young age when he was young.
Tuberculosis.
Right.
He
He
was
had
around a lot of death with his dad because his
correct.
dad was a doctor.
Right.
So, a lot of trauma, but it seems like that trauma inspired, I mean, some of his most famous pieces, obviously.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have the Scream, which is obviously his most iconic work that he had produced, which is kind of the 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 painting of anxiety. You know,
It is. It's like
kind
the
of out
symbol
there.
of anxiety, or
for
a
sure.
symbol of anxiety in today's world.
Right. And I think that you have works like that. He does several pieces around graveyards and death and anxiety of relationships. He was in some really messed up relationships and things like that. And so, at any rate, I think that it's uh, you can have your anxiety, you can fight it and try to deny it and whatever. And you know, there are folks that get medicated for it or take all kinds of things to try to suppress it. Um, for Munch, it was taking that feeling and using it as art fuel,
Yeah.
something to make to inspire his work. And I think that a lot of times as artists, whether that's mental illness or dealing with loss or dealing with anxiety or depression or dealing with one thing or another, artists will put that out on their paintings. Where I think a lot of other branches of society, they just internalize it or they just choke it down or they
Drink it away or
right they
smoke it away.
right they self
Soothe,
right
self-medicate.
self-medicate. That's what I was thinking. But
Yeah.
but at any rate, I think that and he certainly took part in some of that as well.
Right.
He was he drank too much and took part in too many other extracurriculars that he probably shouldn't have been pursuing because of anxiety, because of those things. But I think that his best outlet for society was certainly just saying, you know, here's who I am. I'm going to put it out there and let the world see it a little bit, especially with some of his best or better artworks. And there are lots of artists that have done that.
And I always appreciate, like, that is obviously one of the things I appreciate the most in artists, I think, is their willingness to be authentic. Like, he's putting out these paintings, which people could look at those and be like, oh my God, this guy's crazy. He's insane. He self-medicates, he whatever.
Right.
But instead, it's like he's putting himself out there. He's showing his true colors, his trauma, and using that inspiration is really what made him a popular artist. And I have this discussion with my clients, not to bring in my stuff, but I have this discussion with my clients all the time. And in my situation, like, in the moment, trauma sucks, and sometimes you don't think you're going to get out of it. Sometimes, it's so hard in the moment, you can't appreciate the lesson that it brought or the inspiration or the way it's going to change you to become a better person. But
Right.
a lot of times that's where people make their biggest, like, advances or growth or get their biggest inspiration, which for him, I think, was a very true thing.
Right. Well, and I think that from my own perspective, from my own experience, I mean, having gone through different facets and forms of trauma or unpleasantries, I think that there's certainly something to be said for that. I think that when you when you when you're going through, to use a famous line by Winston Churchill, if you're going through hell,
I was just
keep
singing
going.
that song in my. Well, who sang that song?
It's a Winston Churchill quote.
It's a quote, but someone sang that song. If you're going through hell, keep on going, don't slow down. Isn't that like a country song or something?
That's
Funny.
clearly they've stolen from Winston Churchill.
Okay. So the
But
Winston
that was said by Winston Churchill in the 1940s, during World
repeat it
War
again
II.
for me, 'cause I was
If you're
thinking
going through hell, keep going.
Yeah.
At any rate, I think that there are lots of people that, and again, from my own personal experience, I've gone through things, and I've had loss, and I've had tragedy, and as we all have,
Right.
But instead of and I've used it in my art from time to time. The loss of a father, the loss of a mother, the loss of a child, the loss of relationships, the loss of lifestyles, the loss of this, the loss of that, and at the end of those things, you think, oh my gosh, it couldn't get any worse, and then in some cases you're right, it couldn't. The loss of a parent or the loss of a child, you're right, it that sucks beyond what you hope anybody will have to ever deal with. The loss of a limb,
You have been through.
it's yeah, there are losses, but at the same time, it's like, because I've gone through these low points, at the same time, you know what, that I can still go and sit at that Willie Nelson concert and sit back and listen to some music and have a great time, and not think about like there's going to be another day of something positive happening. Like, it all is not lost because of this setback.
Optimist. Yeah, you're very much an optimist, I feel like, and you stay pretty even keel even when hard things are happening, I feel like. Do you feel like that?
I try to I some
Internally, though, like it makes me look at, so the first part of this card says a composed soul is not necessarily a calm one. Like, a lot of people can be or
Correct.
seem composed, but on the inside, like, different things are happening. And
For sure.
but I feel like for the most part, you're pretty
Well,
composed inside and out. And
I take
some of the
myself
things I love
back
about you.
to my father's funeral. I was a 15-year-old kid. I didn't know one thing from another at that point in my life. I mean, I thought I knew a lot of things, but I was a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
How much did I really know? But the fact of the matter is, I remember walking into my father's funeral, which was in a high school gymnasium. There were thousands of people there. Walked into this huge gymnasium, the people packed to the rafters, and I come in, and I was just, you know, I walked in, I sat down, I did my,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until, like, there were certain speakers that would say things that would make me think of that
Yeah.
that loss, or gosh, that sucks, and you choke up, and you have your emotions, and but I also think that as a young person, I never really dealt with the loss of my father in a really great way. And there were times in my life that I did a lot of destructive things. I made a lot of really bad decisions in terms of how I was going to cope with that loss. But um, but the one thing that I did do that was constructive was I started making art. And I mean, the day that he died, the moment that he died, I was making art, and I've continued to make art the rest of my life. And I've made art about my dad. I've made art about my dad dying. I've made art about my daughter Kennedy, who died. I've made art about my mom passing. I've made art about my mom's second marriage, which was a trauma to me in its own right, but that's a thing for another day.
The point
The
being,
point being that art has been a conduit of of therapy.
I was gonna say,
You know,
therapy
I
to
haven't
you.
I haven't gone to a therapist to really talk about the death of my dad and really deal with that, but I've dealt with it on my own through my art. And maybe I'm doing it wrong. I'm willing to admit that I probably could have, should have, would do it better, but I didn't.
Right.
So I can't turn back the clock. So that's how I've done it, and I think that it has served me well enough to be a contributing member of society. And here we are on a beautiful day, Father's Day, and I can reflect on my dad and my mom and my life and say, there were some really shitty things that have happened, but all things considered, those things have made me who I am.
Right.
You know,
And appreciate the things. I mean, for
right.
me, gratitude, like, I feel like you think I'm a loony half the time, but I try to wake up every morning and start my day with a meditation and gratitude and just like grounding down. And I think that is like, yeah, we can process the thing from the day prior, and yesterday may have been tough or traumatic or whatnot, but today is a new day, and starting that day with what am I grateful for? And like, even if it is, I've got a truck to live in, or giving you as an example, or I'm sitting in an RV next to a lake, and just being grateful. I think wrapping up here, if I could give one piece of advice on Father's Day, and maybe we'll end with what your advice too is, but it's like, try to start your day with just getting quiet for a minute and just focusing on what you can be grateful for, even if it's just the clothes that are on your body, or the home that you have, even if it is a shithole, it's more than a lot of other people. Like,
Right.
what can you be grateful for? And that would be my advice. And let's end the podcast here today with what your advice, your fatherly advice. I'm putting you on the spot here,
Gosh,
but
see,
what
you
would
should
be
have
your
asked me to do this
this is
beforehand, because
no
this is one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, now people are going to say once like some.
off the top of your head, pick a piece of advice. It doesn't have to be the most important thing. It doesn't have to be just
Okay.
something that you feel is important to know or
I
important to share with people.
Well, I think that it's important for people to recognize that you have control of your situation. Even when you don't have control, you have control. And what I mean by that is, when horrible things have been thrust on me, I have a choice. I can either say, you know what, you're going to have to drag me out of here kicking and screaming, or this is my reality. I'm going to deal with it in an appropriate way. I'm going to, instead of throwing a fit, I'm going to approach this like a mature person, and I'm going to pick myself up by my bootstraps, and how am I going to move forward? I have a choice on how I handle the situation that I didn't choose to put myself in.
Right.
I didn't choose for my parents to die. I didn't choose for my daughter to die. I didn't choose to be adopted. I didn't choose to do this. I didn't choose to do that. But here's the reality of where I'm at. I can be bitter or pissed or angry, or I can say, you know what? I want to have a relationship with my biological family. Or there are some people that don't make that choice. I don't understand that, but
Right.
they have choices too, and they made the best choice that they could make at that time. I try to make the best choice that I feel like I can live with. That's the most appropriate choice, and I always think about, not, all's lost. I might as well end it all now. And there are some people that unfortunately feel like they're in that position, and they need to call. There are people that are out there that they can call, they can get help, they can get services, they can get.
There are amazing people out there that
And
can help you
and
through
if you
stuff like
feel like you're in a pinch and there's no way out, call somebody. Because despite my back being all the way to the wall, despite my people being persistent in the fact that, oh my gosh, your world has come to an end, you must be wanting to end everything. You know what? I've been in some really, really shitty situations, but it's never been so shitty that I haven't thought, you know what, there's a way out.
Right.
There's a way that I can improve things. I can work myself back. And I've done that. I've done it time and time again. I moved halfway across the country and said, you know what? Here I am. I've got nobody. I've got nothing. I can't do anything. I can't make the money. I can't do this. I can't do that. Okay, what can I do? And then start working, start making choices, start making small steps, small goals to work it back. And now I'm doing my dream job. Now I'm doing what I want to do. Now I'm with the person I want to spend my life with. Now I'm building something that I want to move forward with, moving forward for the rest of my life. And that's a good spot. And are there going to be future setbacks? Absolutely. That's a part of life. But how you respond to that is a lot about you, not about the situation.
Right.
So
Wrap
that's
it
my
up.
best advice.
You are in control of how you respond to hard things.
Right.
And not hard things, regardless.
Yeah. Easy and hard.
See, you did,
Everything.
You did great. That's great advice. I love it.
Good.
All right. Well, we're going to end on that note. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel and other social media platforms out there. And we will see you next time.
Yeah. Seems like it's time to turn the lights out because the party's over.